Bem-vindos a Inteligências Lúdicas. Meu nome é Rodrigo Manique, estou aqui com o Thiago Bleich.
E aí, pessoal, tudo bom?
Here we have Mr. David Turczi. It's a dream come true. Here, Thiago and I, we were very excited to finally meet you and have this conversation and have to know more about you and your
Great to be here. Thank you for having
games. But to begin with, every great designer begins in a specific moment in life with this in mind. Could you tell us what was the first game you designed? Could you tell us, please?
It all started back in the ancient times of 2009, 2010, I think. And we were, there was like, I think I didn't even know what Euro games were back then. We were playing a lot of Battlestar Galactica every Friday evening. And friend of mine, Mihai Vincek, came back from a summer holiday with his family, and he was like, well, my family can't learn Battlestar, so I had to design a new game for them to play with me. And he showed us a game. And me being me, I was like, ooh, I have ideas. Can I help? And 2-3 years later, we got lucky and got signed with a game that was eventually came to known as Redacted. It's something very different from what I specialized in later. It's a tactical movement, hidden themes, the fairly random combat, but like it had a lot of strange and unusual ideas. But we were all fairly amateurs back then and didn't quite know how to bring out the shine of it. But it allowed me to be at the right place at the right time, because Mindclash Games was starting. They're also from Hungary, same as I am, around the same time when Redacted came out, and they came to us, Mithu, Kate, and me, and asked like, okay, you guys are internationally published designers. Do you have any advice for us? And I played their prototype for Tricarian, and I was like, guys, this is better than anything I've ever played before. You don't need my advice. And by the way, while you're at it, would you like to look at this crazy game I've been designing for these past few years? And that was Anachrony. So Anachrony was my third design ever and my first Euro. So, you know, I got thrown into the deep end fast. And the Days of Fire Budapest 1956, which I also did with the same Mihai Vincek and Kate Nimafro, came out roughly around the same time. I met one of my greatest friends since, David Kirkhope, and helped him release Petrichor. And by the time these three hit the market, I made some connections, I made some friends in the industry, and suddenly I was not a nobody. And because of that, I could try to do more. And, you know, the best practice is to do, and do. So it kept, like every time I managed to deliver something more, something better, something newer, then that got me newer opportunities. And then around 2018, one January Wednesday, I went home saying, every day I go to work, counting the minutes until I can go home and work on my board games. What am I doing here? And picked up the phone, called up every publisher I knew and said, guys, what can I do that you can pay for? I want to do this more. And what's the trick of being a successful game designer? Be very, very lucky. So enough of them said yes. So since 2018, I've been doing it full time. And since then, things have obviously escalated, because if you do it, you know, 40 plus weeks and 40 plus hours a week, you can achieve a lot more than if you do it in your spare time. So, as they say, the rest is history.
So it's a blooming ideas all the time, restless.
Well, these days, there's also the little pressure of having to finish said blooming ideas, and then it's a lot of self-control to, no, don't start a new project, you have to finish that, you have to finish that. And as projects get bigger and more ambitious, it's like perseverance. We've been working at it for 7 years. I don't know what year is it now. Yeah,
Wow.
we've been at it for 6.5 years, and we have at least 2 years left of the project until we're truly done with it, probably more. So Voidfall took us almost 2 years of intensive work to get it where it is. So it's not like, oh, I sit down, it's Tuesday morning, let's design a new game. That still only happens once or twice a year.
Yeah, it took a time to develop a game, right?
And
Yeah, I know
the
that.
more games I've worked on, the more I can tell interesting ideas from actual good ideas. So a lot of time I just like, oh, I've got this great game idea. I spend the next 3 hours making notes, and the next morning I'm like, yeah, that's terrible. Let's not spend a single second more on this. So it's a double-edged sword, but hey, I'm having fun. I get to do what I love as my job. What more could I ask for?
Yeah.
That's so nice to hear.
Yeah.
So we can see in your creations that the love you have, those of them.
I design for myself. If I design a game that's not within my own top 20 favorite games, then I shouldn't design that game.
Yeah. Yeah. You said that you have blooming ideas every time, and I think this is kind of common to a board game designer. One thing leads to another, and how you deal with well, how is your way to think? Do you like to work on more than one game at once, or you
I
sit on one game?
actively work, like actively every day, doing something on it, on about 4-ish games at a time, and then passively think about another 5, 7 more in the background. And there is another 20 which I'm not doing anything on right now, but the game hasn't come out yet, and I've done something, or I will do something, or I need to check with the testers or the developers or something. I am very much not an inventor. I am very much a improver, a tinkerer. So most of my game ideas come from, oh, this game did A nice, that game did B nice, nobody did this yet. And then break off a tiny piece from both and try to put something new together from it. Or for example, one big project that I am very nearing completion, it'll come out next Essen, hopefully. It started out as, okay, what if Barrage was about wind power? And then I drew it up and I was like, yeah, wind power is not interesting because if I want to model it accurately, then it needs to randomly change. Like, how do I make that into an interesting mechanism? Okay, what else is there? Oh, let's make it nuclear power. And then, okay, so if it's nuclear power, then collecting it is not difficult, so there has to be some other difficulty. Oh, I know, it's hard to transport the fuel for it, so there has to be some network building in it. Okay, how do I do network building in a way that it isn't what everyone else has done all day long? I always joke that every Euro game gets better the more Concordia you put into it. Plus, I have some fascination with back building and feel like I haven't done enough. So I thought that, all right, so let's make this back builder game with action tiles. Then on your turn, you either use the action tile to take the action, or you put it on the map as the railway you're building. And it's like, okay, but where do you put it? How is this interesting? Dominoes. Yes, let's make every action tile a domino, and you can only put it on the map by matching it to other pieces. And then I wrote this up, created a cool theme for it because, modern day nuclear power, unless you do it environmentally, then it doesn't smell sexy. So let's go alternative history or something. I sent it off to, and that's the other thing. I like to collaborate with everyone, because if I don't talk about it, it doesn't excite me. It's telling everyone why I think it's good is what is the fun part for me. So it's like, okay, who would I like to design a Barrage-like network building Concordia domino game with? And thus I emailed Simone Luciani and said, hey, would you like to design this game with me? And he came back and said, I love your idea, but I don't think this should be a bag builder, because if I have to think about what action to take and I have to mediate the randomness of my bag, then my head will explode. I was like, all right, let's drop the bag. Let's focus on the dominoes. 2 years later, here we are. So that's how I work. I didn't have one big mechanical invention. I didn't start from the theme, but they both constantly inspired each other. And I could tell you a story like this about almost all of my games, how many years ago Dice Settlers was like, I like what Quarriors is doing, but could it maybe have less randomness? And Roll for the Galaxy was announced but not yet out, so I read the one paragraph blurb of what Roll for the Galaxy is gonna be, and I imagined it in my head, and I designed the game. And then when Roll for the Galaxy came out, it turned out to be a completely different game than Dice Settlers, but they're both about rolling a bunch of dice where every face is good. And then it's like, which one you manipulate, what actions do you cook from it? So yeah,
Nice.
but as I said, I have a story like this about all of my games, so whichever you like, ask and I'll spill the beans.
Shall we talk about a little about Anachrony?
Time travel is so hard to do on board game, right? Usually it's just the story. You go back in time. The game that has nothing to do with time
It's
travel.
normally a setting, not a theme, or a setting, not a narrative, to be precise. And yes, and I didn't know that at the time. This is something I've learned since. What you have to remember is that Anachrony was my first Euro game and my only third game to be designed. So it was a lot of trial and error. I knew I wanted a game about time travel. I just got introduced to the world of Euro games. Manhattan Project and Tolkien was my first two. So I was like, I love how Manhattan Project has multiple worker types. I love how time is represented with Tolkien. So let's make a game where there are two boards. One shows the past, one shows the future, and then the time flows backwards on it, and you can send stuff over, and then the game ends when they meet in the middle. Yeah, that doesn't work because the player's brain can't quite handle it. Plus, who updates the future retroactively when the past changes? So I started dialing it down. And then I showed it at the time. I was getting friendly with RTPA Games, which is how Kitchen Rush eventually happened. And I was heading to Greece for holiday, and I agreed to bring a pitch with me. And I was like, for weeks before the trip, I was like, I can't get it simplified. At the time, the game was like this betting game where you could say, okay, I open a wormhole 5 turns into the future, I receive this. And then if within 5 turns you couldn't build a time machine big enough to send the stuff back, you would get penalized. And I was sitting, I think, on the airport restaurant in London where I was living at the time. And the week before I played Race for the Galaxy for the first time. And Race for the Galaxy is you pick 12 cards, and it's somehow a complete engine builder out of those 12 cards. I was like, what if instead of building this super complicated time machine with 20 different little components and the formula on how to calculate its usage, what if I just built 12 cards or less that some of them allow you to time travel? And I super excitedly explained this to the Greek guys, and they were politely nodding along, not understanding what the hell I'm talking about because I haven't formulated it correctly at the time. Meanwhile, months later, they lost Kitchen Rush, so that was sorted. And then I spent the next year cutting, and getting to the worker placement core of it. And as I said, this was the time I met Mindclash, and after Tricarion came out, or while it was coming out, I asked them to check out my time-traveling worker placement game. They checked it out. The loan mechanism was pretty much, other than the exact way it represented, but it was pretty much how it is in the published game, and they really loved it. And Mindclash is all about world building. Whenever they start a game, they're like, okay, what world is this game about? And my setting at the time was you're a tech startup company who is selling the inventions that haven't been invented yet. And they were like, that sounds fun and quirky, but we don't quite feel the what's the word, the high stakes. Could we maybe save the earth from destruction or something? And I was like, what? So we spent the next year taking every single component of the game and rearranging it completely differently. And then somewhere along the prototype, and the central mechanism was that you had a bunch of workers, and if you put them on your own cards that then suddenly turned into tiles, put them on your own tiles, then that was free. If you send them out to the board, you had to spend an action token. And the action tokens were player colored, the workers weren't. So they hated having to put the action token together with the worker. So and the action tokens were obviously meeples. So I think it was Richard, I don't remember exactly who, once glued a, I don't know how it's called in English, the when you put a name card on your shirt, the little clip from the back of that, and they glued it onto the meeple. And when they put it out to the board, they just clipped the worker into it. And then they were like, this looks like it got into a spacesuit and went there. We should do something with this. And that's how the exosuits were born. So it was really the practicalities informing the theme informing the mechanisms. At the time, it was like, if you don't have a good action, you can toss an action token and take 2 money that then turned into water. And then they were like, what if instead of tossing it at the beginning, once the exosuit theme came to be, then, okay, it doesn't make sense that you get 6 exosuits and then you toss one of them for 2 water. How about you decide how many exosuits you power up and the rest? So the mechanisms that today all make sense as a whole were very much inspired from every direction and never born as a central genius. Like, that's not how I work. That's not how Mindclash works. We're all about building something. Can it be better? Can it be better? Can it be better? And with Anachrony, we found a lot of yes to that question, and that made us all very happy.
I love Mindclash games. I had my mind blown with Tricarion. I backed the first campaign on Kickstarter.
Me too.
The production is amazing and the game is amazing. And,
well, I hope you get to check out Perseverance, because it came out recently, and I've been telling everyone that I think Perseverance is the best Mindclash game to date. But now I have to say, well, I guess Voidfall is the best Mindclash game to date. So, because can we do better? Yes. Yeah. The answer is always yes. So we learn and set our targets higher.
Yeah, the Anachrony. Anachrony is a game in which as soon as you finish the game, wow, there's a story to tell. Wow, this happens here. I forgot to give it back or something, and it has a story. It has a story. Every time people finish playing, it's a game in which 1 week later, 1 month. Remember that time where I forgot to do something?
So, and again, we didn't do it.
It resonates with you.
We didn't do this on purpose at the time, but since then, analyzing our own processes and our own work, we pretty much, I say we because I work with Mindclash as a team on projects like this, we came to the theory of what we call narrative mechanisms. Because 10 plus years ago, when I started designing, there were thematic games where you would draw a card and it would say some story on it, and then some stuff would happen. And there were Euro games which had great mechanisms, but you turned 2 yellow and a green cube into 3 victory points. and with Anachrony, we just wanted something better. And with Tricarion, they already kind of did it. But by the time we made it to Perseverance, we understood the difference, and we're doing it very much on purpose, that it's not enough to make the decision of, can I convert 2 yellow and the green cubes into 3 victory points? But whatever the yellow and the green cube and the victory point are representing need to make in-universe sense. Thus, as long as you put a pretty picture on the front, the game will be thematic by nature without having to write tiny bits of text on cards or booklets or naming everything with fancy things, because if you're not converting cubes into victory points, but you're charging an exosuit with a fuel core, that makes perfect sense. Or in case of Perseverance, you're building a wall, you're sending out your soldiers, you're establishing an outpost. The action establish an outpost involves clearing the jungle, literally taking off the dinos, and then taking an outpost tile and establishing it on the board. It's like it does what it says on the tin. That's narrative mechanisms for you. So and I tried to do that even on non-Mind Clash projects, even on classic boring Euros. Someone thinks to you, everything in it was like, I had the idea of I want a rondel going around in a worker placement board. Okay, let's make it a mountain. Who built stuff on mountains? The Incas. Okay, let's do an Incan build. From then on, every mechanism, how the stairs work, how the buildings flip, what things you can conquer, those were all design theme first. And it's a Italian beige Euro by genre. So I could have just used pink and blue cubes for everything, and mechanically it would have been equally good. But I believe it, like, I don't like cards that just tell you a story where I have to read a story, but I do like games where I experience something, and I guess that just permeated into game design theory.
Wow, nice. It's mind-blowing hearing you say all those things. I am a board game designer on my first game, so it's so nice to hear all these things.
Well,
So thank you.
I don't have a lot of advice to aspiring game designers, but who are you in the game? What are you trying to do? How are we interacting in universe? And does the game model these things mechanically? And if you can answer all of these questions, the game will just make more sense. And even if you can, plaster over the bits that don't make sense, the more plastering you do, the more the game feels off. Either in expectations, like if your theme is a city building, but you're actually not growing a city, then people will like, it feels smart, but I don't like it. It's all of these things inform each other. So that's why the classic question of do you design theme first or mechanism first is like, no, you design everything together.
Yeah. In this past years, you become known on design so many solo modes.
Yes, that is the greatest random irony of the universe. Yes.
Do you remember how many did you design, or
Over 3 dozen, if I had to guess? I don't know. I long given up counting.
yeah?
I once made a pile of boxes on one side, the games I designed, on one side the solo modes I designed. The ones I designed were about as tall as I am. The ones I solo designed, I had to put into 2 columns because
Wow.
was falling over. How did it happen? The first one, Anachrony, happened because we weren't sure that this is going to be a thing, and Viticulture Tuscany just came out at the time, and I played it, and on one half, I recognized its inventive genius. On the other hand, I really didn't like it. I was like, this doesn't feel like the game. At the time, Viticulture at the experience level I had was like, this is a nice game. I enjoy playing. I do these little combos. I look at other, and in the solo, it didn't feel like that. And I was like, why does it not feel like that? And again, at the time, I was doing it trial and error, but today I know that the difference is predictive interactivity. As in, when I play any reasonably interactive game with you, I am playing it with you.
Yeah.
When I play a game with a old school bot, then I am playing a game and the bot happens. I don't play with the bot. And Anachrony's solo mode was, again, lots of trial and error, as published, it was relatively quickly broken, and we had to fix it several times because, again, I wasn't good at it yet. But the idea of you playing the bot needs to feel like the actual game, and anywhere where you would care about your opponent doing something in the actual game. You should care about the bot doing something. And anywhere where I can block you from doing something, I should be able to block the bot from doing something. And as I told earlier, around 2018, I was desperately going around the publishers trying to find things that I could earn money with. And NSKM, which since turned into Board and Dice, was publishing Dice Settlers for me. And because Anachrony was out by that time and everybody loved the solo, I was like, here is a solo for Dice Settlers. And I was on the development team for Teotihuacan. I was helping with the expert balance. Like, how many ways we can break the game. And when we finished the development, I was like, guys, we're ahead of schedule. We have about 3 weeks left until we have to send it to the translators. Do you want me to design a solo mode for this as well? I was like, nah, nobody needs this. This doesn't go on Kickstarter. I'm like, guys, you already paid for my time. Let me design a solo mode. This whatever. How hard could it be? And then that autumn, Teotihuacan came out, and I suddenly had two solo modes in the top 100 of BGG. And then the next year, everybody started calling me saying, hi, can we hire you to design a solo mode? I'm like, I don't know anything about that. Sure. and I learned it on the job. And then I say it's the greatest irony of all time because I don't play solo games. I talk a lot. I buzz a lot. And if I have to sit here in silence, remember my own turn, remember the rules of the game, and remember to execute the bot's turn, and all of it in the correct sequence, I go nuts. It's like I can play about 1.5 turns before I start thinking about 5 turns ahead and 2 turns in the past, and I start time traveling accidentally. So I got lucky. Greatest advice in life, always try to get lucky. I had a handful of people who volunteered online playtesting for Days of Fire, then later for Dice Settlers. And every game, there was about one person who helped so much that when the next game came, instead of calling more volunteers, I just went to that person and said, could you help me again? And X years later, here I sit with people like Nick Shaw, John Albertson, Xavi Bordes, and David Digby, and these people aren't my right hands. These people are my fingers and my eyes and my ears and my brain. And like there are solo modes not yet out, but soon out, where I technically did nothing. I provided them with the theory, but I don't even have to tell it to them anymore because they've done it so many times with my games that they understand it. And they just apply my theory again. And it's like abstracting the bot's inner state, simulating the bot external state, creating predictable VP curves that you can interject with, putting continuous pressure both at the beginning and the end of the game, replayability, adjustable difficulty, etc., etc. And done all of with 40 plus solo modes out there, everything that isn't an unreasonable amount of work, we've already done. Which means a new game comes along, as long as it's of the same genres, the Euro games or Euro-like dudes on a map games or tableau builders. It's just like, all right, let's take the randomizer from Foundations, let's use the resource conversion of Dice Settlers, the network building of Railroads, and there's the solo start playing. So these days, designing a solo mode is about an afternoon for me. So, and sure, then it takes weeks for testers and developers to play it and perfect it, but that's groundwork. That's not artistry. So I love the solo community. I love that they have the patience of exploring my games in depth, because I like to explore games in depth while being terrible at them, which means many of my games suffer from the it'll be fun on the third play kind of situations. And often game groups don't have the patience to get to it. But solo gamers, sure, let's play it again. And Excavation Earth, Tawantinsuyu, now Imperium, these are all games that the solo community picked up. Like, many people said they're good games, but not many people got to the bottom of the surprise I left in the mechanisms, and the solo community dug it out because they had time, they had the patience, and that's super rewarding. And because of that, I will always take them seriously, and I will always make sure publishers treat the solo community as, you know, not second-grade citizens. But I am not a solo gamer. I don't. I design games as multiplayer with interactions, and then it's the bot's job to simulate those interactions. And as I said, there's no secret because anyone who has understood 40 of my solo modes could easily replicate it. I'm happy to have helped the community, and thank you for them helping me back. But it was a side effect to put it correctly.
Yeah, it's more than play the game and compare your score and try to beat your older score. I think this is so boring to me. I never play a solo
Even
game
in
like
games
that.
where the primary interaction is not simulatable, i.e., it's an efficiency interaction.
Yeah.
Even then, it has to be more than a beat your own score. What I've been, for example, Origins, the first builders was an excellent example for this. It looks like a worker placement game, but it isn't, because just because I go here, you can still go there. So the worker placement is not the primary interaction. Sure, it affects prices of the action if you want to go to the same place I do, and sure, we buy from the same market, but that's not the interaction of the game. So what I needed to do was to make the bot ramp up scores crazily by collecting specific things using a very specific algorithm that is known to you. Therefore, either you get a curve that's better than the bot, and then the game is technically a beat your own score, it's just I didn't tell you at the beginning of the game what score you need to beat, or you go, holy crap, if the bot gets a third red die, it's going to score 60 points just for its red multiplier. I'd better buy that red die before the bot does. And suddenly you feel like you're playing it. Or then, informed by what Kanban EV Solo did, I was like, all right, most of the score in Origins comes at the end of the game, but some score comes in the beginning. Why would the player score points at the beginning if they can just focus on a bigger multiplier because the bot's not going to beat them to the multiplier? I was like, all right, any point the bot scores during the game is a minus point to you. And if you hit 0, you lose. Suddenly, sure, the bot will get 200 points in the back end or 100 points in the back end, but it will get 20, 30 points during the game. And if you don't match that, you don't get to final scoring. So pressure. This is not a pressure that's in the multiplayer game, but in the multiplayer game, you do have a choice between early game scores or late game scores, because if you see that your opponent has a better late game engine, then you try to build a lead and ride that lead and rush ahead on the military track or whatever. And since the bot can't chase you there, I had to create another pressure. So the some pressure of the game remains the same, even if some things need to be swapped. So score targets aren't evil, but unpressured score targets are boring.
And we must thank you very much because during these pandemic times, we couldn't barely play with friends. And your games brought us such freshness in this way to play the solo. I am a solo player as well, and these experiences you brought us to us helped us these almost 2 years have to endeavor.
Happy to have help. I just wanted people that play solo to like the games for the same reasons I like them when playing them multiplayer.
Yeah.
Not for it's all right or it's satisfying to put a bunch of cards and then hope that I randomly draw enough to get some statistic to X.
I always liked the idea of Queen's Gambit, board game which was based on Star Wars. And that game, there are many things happen at the same time. 2 things happen at the same time, gigantic. And with Proxion 3, you brought us something like this, but in another
I obviously own and love Queen's Gambit, and yes, it's a dirty Ameritrash, and you can't take it seriously for even a second. But it made me go, so what if Queen's Gambit was a Euro game? That's how this whole thing started. And then the other main inspiration for the game was Quartermaster General, where we simulate this grand epic war by playing a single card. And somehow that single card matters.
Yeah.
There are games where you play 1 billion cards and half of them don't matter. They are, fun. Whereas I want it to be impactful. So I started from the idea of, okay, what if I do a multi-front battle a la Queen's Gambit with the streamlining of Quartermaster General and with the elevator pitch of Vast? Because Vast is, again, another one of those games where I loved the elevator pitch, but I would have taken it into a completely different direction than they did. So instead of arguing whether it's good or bad, I was just like, I'll do my own. And sure, Mindclash projects have taken more time than Procyon, but on Mindclash projects, I have a team of 12 people these days, and they are the greatest at their job. So, things move along. With Procyon, I pretty much did everything myself. I wrote the art brief of every single card. I wrote every page in the rulebook. I wrote the text of every card. I ran 38. I was looking at my playtest stats earlier today. I ran 33 playtests in a year and a half myself, and my playtest numbers are always usually very low because I don't the little things after the practice of this many games and the same genre of games. I don't need, like, once I prove a central idea, I don't playtest it 40 more times because you can't improve it that much by that much more. Sure, people who haven't yet done it 40 times, 30 games, then they should playtest it because that's how they'll find the new problems. But I'm at the point where most non-content heavy games, i.e. games not like Voidfall and Imperium, those things need hundreds of playtests, but not content heavy games. Tekkenu, I playtested I think 7 times before it was published.
Wow.
Sure, the publisher played it 30, 40, 100 times, but I personally played it 7 times. After the 3rd game, it was 90% the same game as published. After the 5th game, it was 99% the same game as published. Because it was one idea. Daniel Tascini invented the genius thing in the middle. I built a game around it. Done. Procyon was, every time I thought I invented something genius, I found something wrong with everything else. Repeat. And I had to do this with 33 complete iterative playtests. Like, until the last 5 playtests, no version was played twice because people started playing. It's like, yeah, that's crap. There's no motivation to do this. And I didn't just want a thematic game. I didn't just want an exciting battle. I wanted a super tight Euro game. Sure, it's a bit more random than your Italian Euro of cube pushing, like the combat deck of the Armada is the most visible source of randomness in the game. But that moment when the game clicks for them and they look at the 6 or fewer cards, for example, the Meld has in their hand at the beginning of the game, and they realize, holy crap, every combination is a viable option. That's the kind of choice, glimmer in your eyes is what I want to cause to players. And Procyon has this 4 times in it. So I had to, like, I think every faction was at least twice redesigned from scratch. Meld was redesigned 6 times, I want to say. That was the hardest one by far. The space map was redesigned about 5 times from scratch. The land map I got right, I think, on the 2nd or the 3rd try. And it was hilarious because I started from very much a wargamer approach, Queen's Gambit. And every time when I made it less of a war game, it got better. Like, disappeared, the individual health tracking disappeared. Right now in the published game, the only thing that has individual health tracking is the Centurions and the Empress. And that's because there it was a choice. Do you send your unit forward that can take the hits, or do you send the units forward that you can send many of? Every other unit used to have health tracking. It's like, nope, nope. There used to be hexes in the ground and in space. Cut the hexes from ground. Okay, ground is now starting to work. Space still quite doesn't work. The problem was always that the strategic choice of what do I want to do was very grand and very smart and interesting. But when it came to, okay, I need to fly my spaceship from here to there, people started counting. And people are very bad at counting, unlike video games. So when they started counting, they started making suboptimal moves. So it was no longer the person with the best strategy that won the space combat, but the person who made the fewer mistake flying. So I was like, so why not just drop the hexes from here as well? I hung to it for a very long time because I was like, no, space battles have to feel different than ground battles. But
Indeed.
I'm never gonna do real momentum-based flight the way Talon or actual space war games do it. And I've studied them to see if I can learn anything from them and ran away screaming. But to me, it was like, I'll tell the story not through representation of the story, but through narrative mechanisms. And then my job is to make the mechanisms as good as possible, and that's a Eurogame design. That's not a war game or not a themed design. Yet, okay, why does this card of the sniper lady does this? Well, because the sniper lady had communications officer training, and she knows how to send up drones to confuse the enemy signals. All right, then let's design another effect for her that a communication officer would do. So it's like, again, there is no theme first, there is no mechanism first, there is everything. So Procyon was like my baby. I didn't do it because I expected it to do well. I didn't do it because I expected people to love it. I did it because there are 3 people on BGG who say it's the greatest game ever, and I'm like, thank you. That's all I wanted to hear, because it's something different. It's something special.
It's so much love.
Yes, it's all love. I would say these days, if somebody pitched Procyon to one of my publishers, and then my publishers would ask me, should we publish this game, I would say, don't, this will never but I powered through. So for those 1,000 to 2,000 people out there playing with Procyon, thank you. This was a love letter from me, so enjoy.
Nice.
Thanks a lot for bringing this game to us again, and this experience.
You talk about a little bit of Imperium, and this is our newest game here in Brazil. Could you tell us about
the Brazilian community will love it?
Yeah, I loved working on it. I love that the both boxes has the same rule book, so I got the work to do. And
I mean, first of all, credit where credit's due. Both Imperium and Voidfall were originally Nigel Buckle's designs. I came on both projects as a developer, and then did what I tend to do and went crazy and added more and more and more and more, and then eventually became a designer. So I don't want people to attribute all the genius of Imperium to me, because about 80% of that genius was there before I started. And I don't like deck builders, and I don't like light civilization themed games. And thus, when I started loving the game, I was like, why do I like it? What's the difference between this game and that other one that I don't like? And how can I do that more? And how can I do that even more? And how can I focus it? And to this day, I lose 9 out of 10 games of Imperium I play, and I love it. And that's so hard with most deck builders, with most civilization games. And of course, the asymmetry, like Nigel had, I think, 8 or 9 decks when I came on board. All of those in one form or another are in the first 16. And the last 3 or 4, like the crazy ones, the Olmecs, the Utopians, the Arthurians, those all came to be by So Niger had the center structure, and then he did the two extreme decks, the Vikings that don't have developments, and the Atlanteans that don't have a nation deck. And I was like, could we do a nation that has both of those things, but doesn't have any of the utility cards, doesn't have advance, conquer, glory, and prosperity? That's how the Olmecs were born. Then came the, could we make a nation that has a nation deck but loses the game when it gets to the end of it? That's how the Arthurians came to be. Then okay, could we make a nation that doesn't have a development deck and doesn't have a nation deck, and it has a masks like the Olmecs, but doesn't cost actions for them to use the masks? And that's how the Scrolls and the Utopians were born. So I heated up towards the back end of the Imperium process, and I started provoking Nigel into better and better ideas, which is why, if and when should some follow-up happen that I could definitely not confirm on this video right now, then I dive in and go absolutely mad nuts with designing decks myself, because now I get it and now I love it and now I want to do it all day long.
Yeah, nice. Do you have a favorite to play on Imperium, and what's your favorite to design?
As in favorite deck?
Yeah, one Civ.
I think I am not allowed to answer that question.
We were wondering, maybe Imperium will go to another eras, like
Imperium will, like, at least the game as it is now will definitely not go to other eras. First of all, because the dynamisms of the modern world is just completely different, and the narrative designer in me would want to create completely different mechanisms for it. It would be about, if it was like 17th, 18th, 19th century, then it would be about political influence or supply lines. If it was 20th century, it would be about industry and population density and stuff like that, which is, whereas in ancient warfare, land and expansion and taxation are central mechanisms. So that's reason one. Reason two, the game has a lot of internal logic to it that is predicated on it being an ancient timescale. The best example of this is the nation deck. The Egyptians and the Minoans that are the 3000 BC, they have 3 or 4 cards in their nation deck. The Vikings, who lost the battle in 1066, a week before the Norman invasion, they have 13 cards in their nation deck. And every other nation has somewhere between 3 and 13 cards. And if you sort the nations in nation deck size order, you would get the same sequence as if you sorted them in historical order.
Wow. Nice.
And if the biggest nation deck is at 1066, then how many cards would you put into Napoleon? Where would Napoleon start from? Napoleon doesn't have to invent agriculture.
Yes.
So this concept of the game doesn't work with era mixing. So any follow-up, if and when we do, that is compatible with Imperium would have to be ancient setting. Can the system be partially or completely applied to other eras? Yes. Are we doing it? Not yet. Will we?
Yeah. Maybe some other places in the world, but in the same time.
I mean, the world is a huge place, and out of the 16 nations in Classics and Legends, well, out of the 13 historical nations, I want to say more than half of them are in and around the Mediterranean, and that's a little bit Eurocentric view. So we would definitely want to go further out, and we've done every cool thing we could with the South European white people. So time to use people from elsewhere on the planet too.
Yeah, well, I would like some samurais and some
samurais
African
are from
tribes.
The 17th century.
Yeah.
If there were Japanese deck, it would probably have religious disputes between the Shinto and the Buddhists from the 7th century, and importing cities from China, and definitely not samurais, because samurais came in the 17th century, 1,000 years later. I know because I've done my history lesson on it.
I'm an engineer, so that part not good.
I learned so much about history just by researching possible nations for Imperium. So
Yeah.
There is a game, upcoming game, you co-designed with Nigel, which is Voidfall. Could you tell us a little bit about it? We are very excited to know.
I've been telling people for half a decade that Nigel Buckle is the best game designer nobody has heard of. And between Imperium and Voidfall, I'm in the privileged position to introducing Nigel to the world. He's been at it a lot longer than I have. He had his first game designed / published, I think, in 2009 or something like that. But back in pre-Kickstarter times, the British board gaming scene was a bit of a wild, wild west. So things went badly, and many of his games disappeared without getting to the public. But the one game of his that did got to a very, very limited public is Omega Centauri. It's a game that he designed in, again, 2009, 2010, which is notable because it's 2 years before Eclipse. And how, if you remember, Eclipse was sold to everyone as Twilight Imperium but Euro game. Omega Centauri is Twilight Imperium but the Euro game. And it's half the length. It only goes to 4 players, but it's hyper interactive. It's zero randomness. It's extremely tight, and it's a knife fight in the phone booth. It's like this much. But it was published by a company who doesn't have a lot of experience in publishing, especially these big, these complex games. The rulebook is close to useless. The player aids that you have to download from BGG and print it yourself were done by Nigel in Microsoft Word. So I knew of the game because I met Nigel in person many years ago, and I gave him a copy of Redacted, and he gave me a copy of Omega Centauri and the printed out version of the player aid saying, use this because the one in the box is terrible. So I learned Omega Centauri, and it is, well, was until Voidfall, my absolute #1 space game ever. As in, even back when I liked Eclipse, I liked Omega Centauri better, but the more I played both of them, the more the movement went like this. So one May afternoon, I want to say 4 years ago, but with the pandemic, it might have been 2, might have been 6. I don't remember. All the years look the same. When we were driving back from UK Game Expo towards the airport, I asked Victor Peter from Mind Clash, saying, so how about we do a Mind Clash Space 4X? Wouldn't that be insane enough? And he was like, what do you have in mind? I'm like, let me send you a copy of Omega Centauri. Then let's set up a Skype call. I'm going to teach it to you. Don't read the rule book. And then you tell me what you think. And they played Omega Centauri, and they were like, holy crap. What do you want to do with this? I was like, well, the game is you plan 3 actions simultaneously, and then the first player resolves the first. Then the first player resolves the second. We go around. And at the end of the round, you produce for the sectors you control, and then you spend some of those cubes either to go up on civilization tracks or to buy special actions with. I was like, first thing I would do is I would take out all these phases and make more actions. So instead of having 3 out of 5 actions and 3 different upkeeps, let's have 6 out of 9 actions. And then let's add more ship types, because there are combat techs, but basically shields, torpedo, targeting the basic corvette techs that are present in Voidfall as well. And I went to Nigel. It's like, look, Nigel, here is what I would do with Omega Centauri. If you like this direction, let's do this, and Mind Clash will publish it. And we started working on it. A year later, we got Omega Centauri 2 ready. We put it down to Mind Clash's table. They played it, and they were like, love the combat, love the action selection, love the pared down but complete Space 4X feel. But could we remove the cubes? Now, for those 3 of you out there that have played Omega Centauri, the entire goal of the game is to collect cubes and then convert them into either track advances or special actions. And we were like, what? What do you mean remove the cubes? Do you want to design a whole new game? And that's when the idea of, okay, let's build things onto the hex so it feels like you're building up an empire. And we kept experimenting with the card selection. It turned from, instead of picking one action, you pick a card that has initially 4, then later on 3 sub actions on it, and then you do some of that. Then we dropped the simultaneous planning because people just couldn't plan that many actions ahead. So it became on your turn, play a card and do 2 actions from that. So the choice became what order and what action from the card instead of planning your turn. And then with every Mind Clash game, it was no longer about what great genius idea we want to put into it, but how can we make it better? And then we made it better, and then we made it better, and then we thought we were done, and then we made it better, and then that happened 4 more times. So, and we knew that we would want it to be solo compatible, but it has a lot of secondary interactions, very few primary, because you don't block each other unless you're attacking or something. So we were like, let's not design a bot for it, let's design a survival mode for it. Okay, then that's essentially a co-op game using the same mechanisms. Okay, so we're designing 2 games then, a co-op game and a competitive game using the same actions and the same mechanisms. This will be tricky. A year and a half later, I have played Void for 72 times during this process. Nigel has played it another 20, 30 times, and we have over 300 locked playtests from our closed beta group. So other than the multi-year saga of Perseverance, this was by far the biggest project any of us have ever done. And don't expect Twilight Imperium, but with less randomness. This is a Euro game where one aspect of your build-up is a spatial map, which you have to develop an engine out of. But it's, 14 turns on average. The game is 14 or 15 turns on average. So it's extremely short, which means everything you do is super duper meaningful. Omega Centauri was 27 actions. We brought it down to 14 turns, each of which 2 actions. So the same number of actions, but the choices are more tied together because you pick the card, not the action. So it's more Euro. It feels more like to me, it's closer to Camp and EV than to Twilight Imperium. But the looks and the story of it truly feels like a Space Empire builder. And it has a co-op mode, which is not a, hey, you can play it against this and do this challenge card, otherwise you die. No, it's a complete game designed for its own satisfaction, for its own challenges. For the biggest problem was difficulty tweaking, because in competitive you just have to shoot at the same level. In co-op you have to shoot at a high enough level that's not impossible. So that was an insane amount of work. So yeah, Voidfall is a no compromise. Everything we know is on the table. Everything we can do to make it as perfect as possible is on the table. I always say that my favorite game is the last one I worked on, but Voidfall is like, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know how can something be more perfect than it. So because if we could, then we would have done it already. I'm not saying it's the best ever. I'm saying this is as far as I can go on up. But we're super proud of it. It's gonna be beautiful. It's gonna be epic. We spent weeks just UI testing to make sure that putting the cubes and the tokens on the board is easy to handle. So, and it doesn't take as long. A 4-player competitive game takes for us about 3 hours. Maybe it'll take you 5 or 6 while you're learning it, but it'll rapidly drop. The co-op game is a little bit longer, but not significantly.
Oh yes. Oh, that's very nice. Especially nowadays, since we don't have time to play 14 hours, and
we wouldn't do that. As I would say, if somebody makes a genius 10-hour Empire Builder game, then great. I'll play 2 games of Dominant Species instead.
Yes.
See, nice.
Because if I want to burn 10 hours, then let's play 2 5-hour Dominant Species instead. Voidfall doesn't even try to compete with Twilight Imperium, with the Mega Civilization, with not even with Clash of Cultures. It's like Space Empire Builder or Ancient Empire Builder is basically the same thing, just with different labels. But Voidfall doesn't try to compete with them. Voidfall is you know, it's Concordia on speed. It's because every game gets better the more Concordia is in there. So
Yeah,
therefore,
I
we put a
agree.
lot of Concordia into it. And, like, to me, the two closest comparisons to Voidfall is Through the Ages and Concordia. So not Eclipse and not Twilight Imperium. So I hope anyone who goes in with that expectation will probably love it. Like, we had a playtester in our open beta who came in, learned the game, played 2 games with his brother, and then he joined the chat and hated it. It's like, this is terrible, this is terrible, this is terrible. And for the next 3 weeks, every second day, he would post a report and mention a bunch of things he hates about it. And then it's like, dude, you realize you've played this game 15 times now and you hate less and less things about it and you're having a lot of fun. And it was like, you're right, I was just expecting something completely different. And then in the end, he went away loving the game. So it's different. It's not your grandfather's Space 4X, as I tend to say.
That's nice. Wow. So anxious again. Hopefully, I will have it on my shelf, my table as well.
I have the prototype here behind me. Of
really?
And Voidfall, so because we're doing it on TTS now.
Oh, nice! Wow, exciting! Oh,
the last one was on TTS, not on physical, so I stopped updating my prototype.
I'm trying to buy it now.
Yeah,
it doesn't work.
Run to the pledge manager.
Yeah,
we will. David, we would like to thank you so much for your time with us, and hopefully in the near future we'll have more.
I mean, as you see, I love talking, and I love board games, and I love board game design and its theory. Therefore, I love talking about it, and I put a lot of thought into my reasons and my theory behind every single game. So talking about the reasons behind my games is my absolute favorite pastime. So, call me anytime. I can talk about all of them.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very much, and nice to be here.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you also. I watched your interview with Candice on Board Game Geek. I love that interview. Yes, and I love being part of this interview. So thank you, Rodrigo, also to ask me to join here. And also thank you, David Turczi.
Turczi. Thank you very much. Take care of yourself, and hopefully in the near future we'll have you here. Hopefully. Take care.
Yeah.
I will close the video.